Welcome to Fredericksburg Mission, a podcast talking all things mental health and wellness in the Burgh. Brought to you by...
How do you shorten the time it takes to buy a car? Car buying just got easier. Pohanka365.com lets you complete as much or as little of the car buying process online. Pohanka365.com. Car buying simplified. Anytime, anywhere.
Welcome to Fredericksburg Mission. My name is Angela Rivers, and today I am here with Gavin Robyn, a local owner of Next Door Photos. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's so nice to have you here. I know we've been wanting to do this for a while.
Indeed. I'm glad we got it on the good old calendar.
Me too. Life seems to always be so busy for everyone.
Could not be more true. Summertime is usually the busy season, ironically.
I know. And then it's going to be Christmas before you know it.
Oh, man. I'm not ready. I'm ready for the cold. I'm not ready for wreaths and trees and cocoa and cookies. And
I could go for some cocoa and
cocoa
cookies.
actually does sound good. I could go for that.
Well, I'd love for us to kick off this podcast by just letting the listeners know what your photography business is all about.
Yes. So my business is really, real estate specific. So we do photos, we do video, we do drone work, and we do virtual tours for realtors. The goal is really just to, create marketing content that they can use to help them publish their listings in a more professional and efficient way. So that's our gist.
Yeah. And how did you get into the business?
Yeah, well, I got into the business a couple years ago. I've been running it since about 2019. A friend of mine, a mutual friend through my family, they knew I loved photography and architecture, and they're like, hey, we got this person that we know who works for this company called Next Door Photos. You ever heard of them? No? Okay. Well, let's just get a conversation starting. And so that happened, like I said, 2019. And, over the, next few months from that initial connection, it was just a gradual, this seems like it's the right thing for me to do, and they sound like a great company. So I got rolled in right around the end of the summer 2 years ago. So that's how I got started.
And what did you do before that?
Before that, I was a very proud shift runner for Chick-fil-A. I did what we call the graveyard shift. You're working from closing time to opening time, and the independent location that I worked for, they had it so truck orders would come in really late at night, and I'd be there with maybe one or two other people, and we'd be handling all the new food that was coming in, and we'd be preparing all the food to then be made for the next shift. So that was my life beforehand. So it was being on a totally different schedule than everybody else as far as work hours are concerned.
And now, do you make your own schedules?
Yes, I get to make my own hours. It's definitely an improvement.
Yeah.
There are nights where I think working into the dead hours is more doable, but no, it's a lot better when you make your own hours, for sure.
And did you always dabble in photography, like even growing up as a kid?
Yeah, I took a class when I was in middle school, another class when I was in high school. Kind of always just came back to it. Growing up, I always had an interest, and teachers always told me, it's like, you got an eye for it. And I kind of always kept it in my back pocket as something that I really enjoyed doing. But when you're young, you don't always know what you're going to do with your life. And that was me. I wasn't thinking of photography
I didn't know
being
until I was
career.
Like 30.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. And then, cameras have even changed.
Yeah, this is true. It's a different world. I mean, when I was in middle school, and I'm not, talking from like, I did film in the 60s. It was, when I was, 12, 13, my middle school class, I had a little, one of those like digital point and shoot cameras you got for $40 at Walmart, and, now I get to work with some of the coolest gear ever that's out there. But no, it's definitely evolved.
Is there a photographer that really inspired you?
There were a couple. Yeah, I loved Peter McKinnon growing up. I always watched his YouTube videos, and seeing his posts on Instagram and everything. That was my kind of teenage hero for photography. I loved Ansel Adams as well. He was an older photographer from the long time ago, but I've got a calendar in my house right now that's got all of his photos and everything. I saw a print in an antique store of one of his shots for like $200, and I was like, oh, almost got it. But he was also a big inspiration for me.
And why did they inspire you?
Just their style. Ansel was more of a landscape artist, and Peter is kind of just he does a lot of different things, and I love the variety. I think it was more just that Peter wanted to teach people, and he still does. I mean, to this day. But I think when I was first hearing about him and getting into his videos and everything, it was actual value that he was bringing to somebody who was not thinking of photography as a career, but wanted to learn more, and having that as an available resource was huge. So it was more than, your high school classes and your middle school classes will teach you the basics, but learning from somebody who actually does it for a living, who actually is, making a lot of money doing it, learning how they operate is just such a different world than being in a classroom.
Yeah. And did you go to school for photography?
No, beyond
beyond
my core education, no. I didn't go to college. I didn't get a degree. It was all self-taught from there.
Yeah. And then for homes, is that something you've always loved to photograph, or did you like doing like self-portraits or anything of that sort?
Yeah, I had a blend. When I was younger, it was all just, I want to try everything. I want to have a variety in my portfolio. And so anywhere I went, anywhere I traveled to, I would always lean towards taking pictures of buildings, just because that was always something that fascinated me more. And as I got older, I dived more into doing portraits, but never specifically real estate. That was something that I learned when I started Next Door Photos.
So have you been really busy during the pandemic?
It's been crazy. Yeah, it was a very hard adjustment, because I had only just started the September 2019, and the pandemic kind of rolled in the beginning of the year. So I was maybe 6-7 months as a new business owner into my job. I had a good amount of consistent business at that point, but it was still very young and it was still growing. I had just hired my first photographer when COVID hit, and he kind of helped me get through the whole summer, and then left to go on and do bigger and better things. But yeah, no, it was busy. It was weird. Everybody kind of around me was saying, the real estate market is just super crazy right now, and we're seeing less and less inventory. And me as a photographer, I'm like, I work with every brokerage there is. Like it's hard when you're one brokerage and you're seeing all of your inventory for your specific brokerage, decreasing. But then if you're looking at the market as a whole, I mean, obviously a lot of inventory lossage, but like overall, for me being a vendor, being somebody who could sit on the outside of the fence and not be directly affected by it, we still managed to get a lot of business.
Did you hear why people were selling their homes? I mean, you see them pop up all the time lately.
For various reasons. People lost their jobs and needed to relocate to find work. People wanted to be in a different environment, different state maybe. A lot of people moved out of the big cities, wanted to be somewhere more community-oriented, more neighborhood-oriented, more rural, as they say. It was different for everybody, but I think what's happening now is even more interesting, because we're seeing things kind of returning to normalcy. But really the biggest issue with what happens was you had all of your sellers wanting to sell their homes, and then the number didn't change. We still had the same number of sellers that wanted to sell their homes, but overall there was the fear of, if I sell my home, I have to be like every other buyer out here right now, struggling to find a home to buy.
It's true.
And so that's what initially kept people from selling their homes, was that, along with whatever other reasons, or maybe X, Y, and Z. My kids are going to be going to school, or I've got to find work locally first, or I got to get a loan settled first, whatever it may have been. The main reason was really just that the buyers were being so aggressive, and are still aggressive. It's not changed really. It's stayed consistent on that front, where everybody's getting multiple offers guaranteed on houses. So it's definitely gotten more interesting coming on the tail end of the summer here now in 2021. But 2020, it was just a stream of just low inventory, really aggressive buyers. It made me happy that my family, didn't want to sell, and it was a good time for renters as well on that front.
Yeah, but let's talk about how the photography, it makes the whole buying process better. And isn't that what Next Door Photos is all about? Yeah. So, the process really is, for a realtor, it's, and this is very abbreviated. A realtor would have a much better description, but, processing the paperwork with the client, getting the house ready to sell. And from there, it's all marketing. That's all the agent's responsible for. And so there's two, really key
business people that you would need as a realtor. One would be a stager for a home. The other one would be a photographer. Those are the people who are going to make the house look as good as possible. Outside of that, I mean, you've got electricians, plumbers, you've got renovators that can do the work on the house. But as far as marketing is concerned, stagers and photographers are like top tier. And if you're not using a professional photographer as a realtor, you're going to lose business overall, whether it's through just taking pictures on your phone and thinking that kind of solves the issue for you, or there's clients in the future that may see the stuff that you've sold before and they're like, it goes so much further from an online presence standpoint when an agent has professional media, whether it's done through social media, whether it's done through Bright MLS. When they have the professional media there, people will look at some of their listings that they've sold, and there's an integrity factor with that. So people, homeowners, buyers, they'll look at the work and they'll say, oh, this person like knows how to sell a home. This person knows what they're doing. This person hires professionals.
Cares about their home too.
And cares about it, right? It's not just somebody who's going to take iPhone photos for 5 minutes and,
People still do that though. You still see, because I'll glance at new homes all the time because I have this, issue with looking at beautiful homes. It's a problem. But you see people that will take it with their cell phone and they're like looking in a mirror and you can see their legs and like, scroll on, not that house for me. But it makes a big difference.
It does. I mean, if you're a Zillow enthusiast is what I would call.
It's terrible.
And that's the majority of
and I don't even want to buy a
new
house.
You see a beautiful home with like drone photos or a listing video or a virtual tour, and you're like, oh shoot, I'm ready to buy this right now.
Yeah.
And that's the impression that we want to leave both buyers, sellers, and agents with, is like, I want to buy this home. And so our goal really with that is just, we want to produce great content that can be used for publishing listings. But it's not just about the listing. It's also about the agent's integrity of their business and helping them to get more listings in the future.
So does the agent hire you? Is that how it works? Or does the home buyer
it's specifically done through the agent. We will, sometimes get a buyer who's doing a home for sale by owner, and they'll use just one time.
Harder, right?
Yeah, well, it's usually only a one-time exchange, whereas realtors will continually use us, which is our goal. We want to create long-lasting business relationships with people in our area, and homeowners are great because if you're doing for sale by owner, you are incredibly brave in this time. There's still a need for realtors, and so that's the niche for us. Is just the market and buyers and sellers. You need to have a photographer that your agent hires, whether it's Nextdoor Photos or somebody else. If you don't, it's just going to hurt you one way or another. And
droning is fairly new, right?
Droning's been around for, I'd say, 5-7 years. Don't quote me on that. It's definitely been more popular in the last year, I guess, and that's just for any marketing product in general, because everything's online now. It's so much more different than it was in 2019. When I first started the business, it was just, there's not as much demand for certain products. I had to really sell it to people and be like, this is something that can really help you. 2020 rolled around and it's like, they want everything. They want all the products. I didn't have to sell anything to anybody because they saw the value for what we were doing. And like, if it's all online, then you need a photographer, because people aren't going to go, and see things in person first. They're going to look online. They're going to be looking on Zillow. They're going to be looking on Realtor.com. And that's just how it works now. And if any agent is behind on that, they have a lot of work ahead of them to get to where some of these other agents are. The top producers, anybody you see is producing top listings. They have a professional photographer. They have a stager. They have people that they trust who can help them publish their listings.
Yeah, and it's frustrating too, as a consumer or buyer or whatnot, when there are no photos. Yeah, that still happens too.
You get there and you're like, oh, this address sounds great. It's in a beautiful community. It's got a great school for my kids. No idea what it looks like. And it's gotten to a point where buyers will be so aggressive that they don't care. They'll go and they'll make an offer sight unseen. That happened a lot over 2020 and going into early 2021. And it was kind of like the agent's excuse, that I heard a lot was just, well, it's going to go under contract anyway, so why do we need all these services? Why can't we just cut corners and make this faster for our buyers? Like, well, buyers need to realize that there's a integrity process to getting a home bought. It's one of your biggest purchases that you ever make in your life. And if you're not doing it the right way, you're going to regret it. So we're not seeing it now, but there's going to be a huge uptake, and 2-3 years, maybe sooner, where all the houses that went without appraisals, without inspections, they're going to have issues in the house that they're going to have to fix that could have been fixed before they bought the house.
Yeah.
But they decided to cut the corners and not do the marketing side. And so you don't have all these things that you should have had when you bought the home. And that's going to hurt you later on.
You can even have an appraisal and have hidden
hidden
mistakes.
issues and mistakes.
That was my
Absolutely.
house.
Yeah. And it's hard because you have inspectors and appraisers that are like, this should never have changed for us. We should never have had a decrease in business because this is 100% a part of our process. But I think there's a part in which agents just got overwhelmed. We have so many buyers that are living in hotels, renting out apartments that want to buy a house. I think I would assume safely that most buyers agents have at least 20 to 25 people on a list of that are just waiting. That are just sitting around. We had a lot of people that moved from DC that wanted to be closer down to Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania. A lot of New York people, a lot of Florida people as well, specific to Virginia. I found it so weird. In 2020, whenever I would drive on 95, it was like New York licenses and Florida licenses just popped up all the time, more so than regular Virginia licenses. Like, we're getting run out of our own state here. We got all these people from these bigger cities that don't want to be where they were living. Like, it was a miserable time, especially for New Yorkers.
It can be exhausting too, being in a big city.
Yeah. Well, I got to just track some of the news and everything of what happened in New York. And I have no judgment for anybody who wanted to not be living there. When you're in such a condensed area, you want to be somewhere where it's more spread out. And so a lot of bigger trends, that people were looking for with homes that kept the process even more difficult was people wanted a lot more space on their interiors. They wanted open floor plans. They wanted to have a lot of room, and they wanted to have a lot of land. People wanted to have a place where they could, have a home office and have their kids running around in a basement where they couldn't hear them, because everything moved to the home.
Yeah.
Work moved to home, and family life moved to home. School moved to home for a season, and that was 2020 in a nutshell. So a lot of trends really flipped upside down because of that.
And so then people that are waiting to buy too, they probably have totally different needs than they would have. So it's even tougher to buy a home.
Right. Well, and not all the homes are going to have those needs that buyers are looking for. At this point, there's so much aggression that buyers are going to take whatever they can get and work their way towards what they want. But that also created a lot of challenges for homes that just didn't meet the mark for specific buyers. And so I think a lot of builders who are building homes now are like rethinking a lot of their structural ideas of like, what are people prioritizing, and what's going to bring more value in our construction process to clients nowadays. And they're also having to deal with the economy being what it is. Lumber costs are ridiculous right now. Yeah. And how do you rethink that as a builder? How does that operate, and are people willing to pay more for it? Absolutely. But it's a challenge. If you can't buy a home, you don't have enough money to build a home, there's very few options left at that point besides renting or crashing in a hotel until you find a home to buy, or you have enough money to build one.
And then when you do photograph a home, wouldn't it go for, or possibly go for, a higher price?
Yes. Yeah, so, the photography side, when it comes to marketing, it's always going to bring more value to the home. There's not necessarily a literal equation to like, if you get professional photos, you're going to have a higher asking price, because agents can't really sell that and guarantee that to homeowners. But if you can look at market trends, you can look at statistics, you can say, okay, listings that have professional media, they get higher value. And not just for the listing itself, but for the homeowner selling it, to show that they've actually taken care of their house. And then for the agent, say they've taken care of their homeowner and they love what they do and they have a good idea of how this business works. So it does bring value, just in a more boomerang way.
Yeah, you would think that more agents would want to utilize the services.
I think more agents have come around to it in the last year than in the last 5. I'd say more agents have joined up with other photographers because it's become so saturated now than in the last 5 years. I've seen little photography companies sprout up everywhere because it's in such high demand for photographers to have business with agents. So it was an awakening for realtors to think that, we've been getting told for several years that marketing online is important. Now it really is a necessity for what we do.
Do you think that was because people couldn't go out of their home? Like that was a real thing?
Yeah.
Like, not just because they didn't want to, but because they couldn't?
There was probably a good 6-month margin, and it was different in every single state. Nextdoor Photos being a franchise company, we got to gather statistics from all of our locations across the country. So it was different for everybody. But here in Virginia, there was a 6-month margin where people just didn't do showings in person at all. Whether it's because you had, potential clients that just didn't want to risk getting COVID, or it was agents who didn't want to be around people. So that really switched gears for a lot of people of just, okay, if we're not going to do this stuff in person, which is an agent's bread and butter, it's really tough to not be able to do that. If we're not going to do things in person, then what's the alternative? Okay, well, it's virtual stuff. It's getting virtual tours of the house, it's getting photos and videos of the house. And that's what really skyrocketed for us, was coming in and be we're here to save the day, because we do all of that. And so that really helped us as a company to be able to use COVID and bring a positive impact out of it.
And now there are 80, is that correct?
Roughly 80 locations, for Nextdoor Photos. We've got a couple in Canada, and most of our locations are stateside, but they're all independently run by different people. So I run them one here in Fredericksburg. We got one as far as distance goes, closest would be our location in Virginia Beach. We have one or two starting up north. I think we have one in Baltimore that just started up. So our kind of ambition and goal with that is just we want to expand to where we have a networked location for every state, and every state has at least 5 or 6 different locations running out of major cities. And at that point, it's who else would you want to use?
Yeah. So do you go down to Virginia Beach? Are you regional so you can spread out your business, or
right?
Are you
so
just
it's regional to a point. We are located in Fredericksburg. Our territory is between DC and Richmond, and that is the same kind of vibe for a lot of the other locations. They're based out of one specific area or town or community, and then they branch out into other places. It's kind of similar to Chick-fil-A actually, which is funny. So you have operators that will start a Chick-fil-A location, but they can start a franchise themselves and have multiple Chick-fil-A stores that they run. Same thing for Nextdoor Photos. If you wanted to have a neighboring territory and you wanted to operate both at the same time, you could do that. You could start up both locations, or start one and then work your way into the other. So for example, we're working in Richmond right now. We don't have a location there, but that would be a location if we had somebody in Richmond who wanted to become a local owner, or someone like myself. I could be hey, corporate, I would love to have Richmond as my territory. Can I make a second location out of it? And you pay the capital you need to start the location, and it runs separate, but you can have one person running things. So we have a couple people in the company that run 2 locations. I think we have one that maybe runs 3, but I'm not sure.
Wow. And then do you have photographers that work underneath you, or?
Right. So it's all done through independent contracting. We have about 5 photographers on our team right now. And they operate within our kind of structure. Is just that you have the local owner, and then you have media professionals. And so they get hired as freelancers essentially. And the commitment is just, it's all flexible. So you give us your calendar every single month, and we just fill it with shoots, and either you can take them or not. There's no 9 to 5 obligation, which makes it really ideal and tempting for photographers, because the flexibility is super appealing, for wedding photographers, for music video filmmakers, who have these big shoots to do maybe for 1 weekend a month, and the rest of their month is just them editing and looking for other business.
That's the hardest part too, is the editing.
It is. And it's great that we have our different setup here for Nextdoor Photos. The media pros we hire don't have to do any of the editing themselves. We actually do it all in-house, which is super great for them.
Really nice. Yeah.
And for me, I would not want to be behind a computer for that long. I envy the editors who really know what they're doing. And it's a lot of learning, a lot of technical computer science type things that I'm not proficient at all.
And then do you do other photography outside of this now, or do you just stick with Nextdoor?
Yeah, I guess it's a blend. There's Nextdoor Photos is my main kind of thing. I do portraits for friends and family just as needed, because I have a camera, I have some level of experience, and nothing in a professional sense. Nextdoor Photos has kind of just been my bread and butter. It's what I always wanted to do in one way or another. I looked at like a Frank Lloyd Wright house and wanted to be the guy who like photographed those houses and put them in magazines. That was my kind of ambition. And in a weird roundabout way, it's like now kind of what I'm doing. So I had no desire to try and pursue anything else after I got into Next Door Photos.
Yeah, it was meant to be.
It was.
It's people always talk about passion and purpose,
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
You're right there.
Well, and the cool thing is just I had no intention of going to pursue something. Like when I was doing Chick-fil-A, it was, I was going to work there for a year or two. I was going to save 10 grand and invest it in the camera gear, and then just go out and find architects or people I had no idea that it would be involved in real estate. I was just like, I'm just going to find people who build buildings and ask them to take pictures of their buildings, and that's going to be my plan. But it was a very vague goal. And so when Next Door Photos rolled around, it was so much more focused. Yeah. And not only did I learn how to operate within real estate, but it's just learning how to be a business owner, learning how to handle a team, learning how to do things in a specific industry was so great that Next Door Photos corporate was able to train me for that. So I had no business experience, no finance experience. I had some photography experience, but nothing in the real estate realm. So doing what I'm doing now, it's really cool because it's something that I can then pass on to my team and teach them how to do what I do. And it's what ties into the whole local ownership side too. If people want to join up and part ways and do a location themselves, like they'll not need any other prior experience. They can just go and do it, and Next Door Photos will train them for it.
Yeah, and then if you move too.
Yeah, you can start up a new location ideally. I think my ambition would be like if I get to move from Fredericksburg, it would be to like start a location in like Dubai and take pictures of like the skyscraper buildings or something. Yeah. I'd be like the first person to spearhead a Next Door Photos international location. Right now we have US and Canada. We need to get like, something a little bit more cushy as far as the architecture goes. We have a lot of cool buildings here, stateside and in Canada. A lot of other cool buildings in like Germany.
It's different architecture.
It is, exactly. But I would love to have more Next Door Photos locations elsewhere. And just it's an entirely different realm of business, I'm sure, for real estate in other countries.
How long has the whole organization been around?
It was started in Michigan, and that was about 5-6 years ago. Started by our CEO, Taylor Blom, and some of his family and some family friends. And they got together. They saw the niche for it in Michigan, that people wanted to have a real estate photographer and somebody who could do everything, in a one-stop shop type manner. So that's how it got started.
So now you were recently married.
Yes.
Yeah. So were you really particular about your photographer?
I was, yes. Me and the wife, we made photography a top priority. They have a kind of when you're first getting engaged, and the regular thing for us young folk is to Google everything.
Yeah.
So we Googled, how to plan a wedding, and their first thing was, prioritize what you really want. What's really important to you as a couple? And we said photography was really important. We wanted to have every moment captured, and we wanted to have the right person for our photographer. So we probably spent like the first month or two like just figuring out what we were going to do for wedding photos. We had a photographer who did our proposal shoot, and he did a good job, and we were like, we want to find somebody that's like out of state, and we realized how expensive it got. And so we went back to our proposal photographer, and we were like, hey, like, would you be willing to do our engagement shoot and our wedding? And he was like, yes, here's my price. And I was like, all right. So it ended up working out, and he did a great job. His name's Robbie Johnson. If you guys have not heard of him, please go check out his socials. He's phenomenal. But he did our stuff, and he nailed it.
Aww, and she is the best barista at Italian Station,
best barista
right?
downtown. I will challenge anybody who says differently. Yeah. She is the best barista in downtown Fredericksburg, 100%. I stand by it, and she wanted me to make sure that I said it on the podcast today.
There you go. We can say it again, too, at the end.
Best barista in downtown Fredericksburg. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, when we were prepping for this, though, you told me that her family has quite a connection to UMFS. Maybe not directly, but your mother-in-law was a foster parent. Is that correct?
Is currently, yeah. So it was something that I had, no prior experience in. My parents never fostered. And then when I started dating my wife, Bree, and her family does foster care, being in their house and just seeing how they operate was such a mental shift for me of just like, wow, this is really important that people actually know what this is like, and that people get to experience it in one way or another. Not necessarily that you have to be a foster parent, but just that you can be involved in one way or another to helping kids. That's such a huge part of life that people often neglect.
Has she ever given you any insight as what it was like as a sibling?
Yeah, well, I mean, she's told me plenty of fun stories from her childhood about having foster kids, where it's just, you know, essentially a kid just gets dropped off at your doorstep at like 3 a.m. and you're there to take care of that kid as long as needed. There's no end date in sight. It's indefinite. And nothing's a guarantee. So sometimes you'll foster for a couple weeks, sometimes it'll be a couple years. And there's just no guarantee. So I think I came to have such a huge respect for my now in-laws, but also for foster parents all over that have willingly just opened up their house to kids in need. That's such a huge way to serve a community and to provide positive impact, just to be a family where it's like, we know you've had hardship, but we're going to bring you in and we're going to feed you and clothe you and take care of you and love you until you're off to your next chapter in life.
Yeah. And have you photographed their house too? Maybe not the kids, but you know.
We've not, no, but I know my mother-in-law, like you, is a Zillow enthusiast. So she may be looking for a house and may have me come over and photograph things. But no, spending all that time there, it was definitely, it was cool to see just what my business does can, you know, positively impact what they're doing as well. And there's a connection with that. So, you know, I've definitely loved being there and just learning and absorbing the atmosphere. It's, you know, it's not easy for sure. For anybody who has, you know, experience in foster care, you would all say it's definitely it's a challenge. It's so beyond just natural child rearing, because there's so many complications that can come with foster care and with children who've had really hard beginnings in their lives. It's cool to see, just on a very practical level, just like people that I know and that I'm now family with doing that. And I'm proud to be a part of a family that does foster. So it's great.
Thank you. And has Bree had, you know, experiences that mended who she was because of that, do you think? Or
she kind of always told me, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, your childhood forms you. And so I think for her, the biggest thing that she learned out of foster care was just that she loved being with kids. She loved taking care of kids. And that was something that I always found really cool about her when I was dating her. I was just like, wow, she's just like, she really loves taking care of kids. She really wants to do that as a career one day. And I think it's something that I really admired with her.
That's why she's so friendly to everyone.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
At the coffee shop.
Well, she'll take your kid and just like hang out with the kid. I mean, she won't talk to you. She'll talk to your kid. 100%.
So is that a precursor to you having babies soon?
No. To like my mother's listening now, no, it's going to be a while. We're gonna wait. We have a puppy. That's enough for right now. That's
you always have to start with the puppy.
Always start with the dog. If any of you newlyweds out there are thinking of having a kid, don't. Just wait. Start with a dog and you'll get some idea. Very small, because I'm not going to say that raising a puppy is like raising a kid, because it's not, but you get some small idea what it's like to have just another life form to take care of.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely. And also, speaking of community and, you know, great work and giving back, your mother does a lot of advocacy. Is that correct?
She does, yeah. So it's actually all my family now. My mother, my father, and my little sister. They all run a shop downtown in Fredericksburg called Freedom Society. It's on Caroline Street, right across from Orfino. Also a great business. Yeah. So their whole gist is they do tea and desserts and other various delicious foods and jams and jellies, but it's also a gift shop, and all of the gifts made and sold in the shop they're made by survivors of human trafficking. So every single product, I mean, they sell jewelry, they sell handbags, they sell t-shirts, they sell silk robes and bath bombs. All that is made by survivors of human trafficking.
And your mom is going to be one of my next guests.
Yes.
So I'm excited for her to give her enlightenment on the global issue, because it is a big issue. We see it here. You know, I'm on the board of Safe Harbor, and there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of trafficked children. Well,
it's crazy that none of that hits the news. None of that is seen by the general public.
It's not something,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and people are even more shocked to hear all that happens here in the States.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just an international issue. It's not just something that you can, donate money to a, organization for that's, thousands of miles away. It's something that you can actually have positive impact for here, like in your neighborhood, in your town, in your city. It happens.
It does.
I find it so funny. Every single year the Super Bowl comes around, and that's like one of the biggest hubs for human trafficking in the country. That happens every single year, and you have mountains of policemen that'll come in and try and make sure that doesn't happen. It still happens, of course. And so part of my mom's advocacy for it, and she'll go into much more detail, is just that if you can change one life, that's the most important thing. And all of the women and people that work with the organizations that she works with that provide the materials that they sell are not only rescued out of human trafficking, because that's really only just the one step of the process of getting out of the human trafficking industry. It's also got to be rehabilitation, sustainable living, and you have to learn how to make a living. Oftentimes people don't know, whether it's stateside or international, it's especially international, you're at the bottom of the food chain. If you've been in the human trafficking industry, it's like having a record. And if you don't already have a way to make a living, you are not going to get a job. And so part of what the organizations that my mom works with kind of all banded together called Freedom Business Alliance. And she'll be able to go into more detail on that. But their organization is involved in not just rescuing them. It's not just a police force that goes in and raids red districts. It's people who are also willing to work with the victims to rehabilitate them, bring them into a safe environment where they can learn a professional skill and use that skill to then make a living for themselves. That's the biggest part that a lot of people don't actually think is important. It's the most important part. People will get rescued out of red districts all the time, but it's the fact that they don't have those extra steps that gets them sucked right back into the whole process.
Do you have any insight as to why it's not publicized as much, do you think? Your own opinion?
I think my own personal opinion would just be that it's too hard for people to really handle. When you see those numbers, it's really jarring. If you ever take a trip to the slums in India or Amsterdam, it's horrific. Some of the things that you see. There's a couple museums that have done great exhibits for the general public to be able to get an idea of what it's really like. And I've gotten to go to some of those museums, and it's scary. I think that's why the general public has not seen it. I think if you can look at the last year of everything that happened with COVID, no matter what your political opinions may be, it's like it scared people. That's just objective truth. It scared a lot of people. We had toilet paper that ran out.
It did.
We had just everybody going crazy with masks and just all of the aggression that came out of it. If you're going to bring something like human trafficking to the general public and to the general media, there's no way to sugarcoat it. There's no way to present it other than what it actually is. I think some news companies will try their best, and when they do, it's often that the general public just is not going to care. It's not my problem. It's thousands of miles away. No, it's not.
No,
it's not.
It's not. Speaking of that, my ex-neighbor was arrested for trafficking his daughter. So it does happen right around the corner.
Right around the corner, and you would never know.
You would never know. No, definitely not. And it's scary, and it wasn't publicized as much as it should have been. But I mean, it scares people. And the last thing the media wants probably is to not scare people.
Well, I had a friend who's a filmmaker, and he did a short film on the realities of human trafficking, and oftentimes it really scares people stateside, and his short film really symbolized it well. It can start with just your daughter receiving a random message on social media from a fake account that tells her to meet at a certain place at a certain time, and kids being kids, it's like they're not going to know any better.
No,
and if they get themselves into a situation where parents aren't there to supervise and protect them, it's a tough line to walk, because it can happen. It doesn't happen to everybody, but it does happen.
It does,
You want to be aware, and you want to be doing everything that you can to advocate against it. That's the biggest thing. And for anybody who's, thinking of like, okay, well, how do I get involved? How do I make a difference? Don't just blindly give money to an organization. Like, find somebody that knows their stuff and talk to them about it and ask them how you can help. And that's why I think organizations like you guys' organization are so important, because you guys are willing to take that step to like tell people like, this is how you guys can really make an impact positively, not just on a global scale, but on a local scale as well. And that ties into human trafficking, that ties into mental health, all of the above for that.
Thank you. Well, being in that family, you probably had quite the upbringing.
Yeah, it was. It's something that people always are kind of struck by. My dad was a ministry leader for most of my life, and a lot of people tell me, they're just like, well, where do you kind of grow up? And I was like, oh, all over. And they're like, oh, you like military? No, ministry. I'm like, so what's that like? I'm like, oh, it's kind of the same as military. You move a lot, you meet a lot of different people, and being in a family of just entrepreneurs is weird. Because there's just so many different business ventures that you're doing, so many people that you're in dialogue with all the time. Being a kid in that environment was really cool. I think I got to do a lot of just world building in that sense of just I learned a lot about how the world works and what my role should be, as as a person in my family, as a person who could do business with other people. It's like, the amount of opportunities missed by small business owners, by large conglomerates even. It's just, there's so many far and few between that, it's disappointing. And when I started hearing more about that and learning more about that, my goal was, whether it's through Next Door Photos, which is what I'm doing now, or whether it's through some other kind of business venture, I always wanted to have some kind of a positive impact being carried out in one way or another.
Yeah, and you were, one of the youngest owners?
Yes.
Right?
So I got hired when I was 19 years old. I did Chick-fil-A for about a year, so from 18 to 19. I graduated high school in 2017, and I left for a year to get out of the nest and do an internship. And I came back. I was like, I'm going to work, I'm going to save money. And then Extra Photos came around. And to this day, I think I'm still the youngest local owner. Hopefully no one's taking that title from me. I'm going to come after him and encourage them for it. But I would like to still be the youngest one. So
yeah. How has that been?
It's had its challenges, I think a lot of people initially were like, when I first got hired, kind of the board of hiring the people with Next Door Photos is like, we've talked to a lot of young people that they really want to do this, and not all of them really worked out. What's going to be different with you? And I was like, shoot, I don't know. I'm young. This is something that I know I would love to do. Like, it's my passion. And they're like, okay, that's the biggest difference, that for young people, like if you don't know what your passion is, try not to, how do I put it? If you don't know what your passion is, be okay with working a simple job until you find out. Be okay with that. And for me, that was Chick-fil-A. I was like, I'm not going to do this career-wise. So I'm going to save money, and I'm going to put it into something that I know I'm going to love to do one day. And roundabout way,
and there
here
you
I
are.
am.
Yeah. If you were to tell any young person listening, if they wanted to start a business, be an entrepreneur, and they were kind of, I don't know if I can do this, what would you tell them?
Don't listen to everything that your school says. 100%. Whether you're public school or private school, don't listen to what
unless it's
your school
positive.
say. Well, I mean, obviously, but more in the sense of when it comes to careers. I mean, you take all those aptitude tests and all those standardized tests and the FAFSAs and everything.
Yeah.
And you think that's what everybody is saying you should do, but don't. That's the easiest thing I can say is just don't let every influence around you affect your life choices. You have to pick and choose who you're going to listen to, and from there, again, be okay with spending time to learn who you are first, and then learn what your passion is, because often those two will come into kind of a crashing sequence, if you will. Learning who you are and then what you love. For me, I graduated and I know I didn't want to do college because I didn't want to have student loans. I didn't want to have a degree that would prove me useless in the business realm. So I did an internship that cost me, $1,500 to go to. And I did that for a year. It was 80 hours a week of just chopping trees, washing dishes, making beds. And all of that work just taught me who I am, but also what I can do. And then coming back home, doing Chick-fil-A, I wanted to just have that be continued in another season. I'm going to work, I'm going to save, I'm going to learn. And that was time well spent. I think any young adult who is thinking of going to college, go for it. Don't be afraid of not going for it. If you know what you want to do, if you're going to be a doctor, if you're going to be a lawyer, and you're going to stick it out, you're going to put the work in, and you're at that place where you're young in your life and you know what you want, college is for you because you still need certification for those types of things. But if you're going to college for a business degree or for a liberal arts degree, there are so many other resources nowadays where you can get the same kind of training, the same kind of classes for so much cheaper, and you can get the same kind of certification from those classes that you would get with a degree. And nowadays, companies like Nextdoor Photos, they don't care if you have a degree. They don't care if you have that kind of experience. There are other companies like Nextdoor Photos that just don't look at that stuff anymore. I think we're still in the era of, we have a lot of older people that still think college is a necessity for you to have a career, and it's not. I am living proof of that. I graduated high school. I got my bare minimum of education, and I just took time away to grow myself as a person. And then the business really just came to me because I was looking for opportunities, because I was telling people this is what I love to do. And from there, here I am now. It's just, it kind of really transcends from there. So that would be my thing to say to young people is just, if you know what you want to do and you know you need a degree to do it, go to college, get the student loans, get the degree, get the job, pursue that path. If you don't know what you want to do, don't be afraid to take some time and figure it out. Don't be afraid to, and sometimes I think a lot of people will say, well, college is that's what that's for. It's like, well, yeah, but college is also where you rack up a lot of debt for a degree you're not sure you actually want.
Right.
And so,
or you change degrees.
Or you change degrees.
I changed mine 3 times.
Right. And student loans, right? Crazy.
I didn't have them, but yeah.
You didn't?
No.
Lucky.
Yeah.
Not everybody else's story.
It's
so
not. It's not the majority story.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the tough thing is if I were to go to college, that would have been my story. And I didn't want that to be my story. And for a lot of other people, that's their story. So it's tough.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you know people who are still paying off their student loans.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a life debt at that point. I mean, just, it's worth it. I think if college is your path, 100% do it. If it's not, don't be afraid to go counterculture. Don't be afraid to carve your own path and make your own time. Especially when you're young. If you're 17, 18, you don't have to have your life figured out. No. It's okay. It's really okay. And yeah, I really try and keep, like, if I know any high school seniors, I'm like, guys, if your parents are pressuring you to go to college, like, you don't have to go. Yeah. You don't. You really don't. It's a great place. You can learn a lot. You can get a degree that can maybe get you a job, but you don't have to go.
It's true. It's true. Everybody's different.
It's true. There you go.
And so I asked this question to all of my guests. At UMFS, we pride our families, our staff, our children as being unwavering champions. How are you an unwavering champion in the community?
That's a great question. I think a couple different ways. For one, just being one who's consistently giving back, whether that be, I mean, we do that in a couple practical ways. Specifically through Nextdoor Photos, we'll do charity events. We'll photograph charity events, which not a lot of people are able to do or pay for. And for us to just go and say, hey, we'll do it for free. That's that's one of the biggest ways that I love to give back when it comes to just being a community investor, in that sense. Not a literal investor per se, but an investor of relationships, an investor of positive impact.
And it puts you out there too in a different realm.
Exactly. And that I think has been my biggest way of giving back. I think there's more interpersonal ways, but as a business owner, I think for me, it's being able to support communities by just, this is what I do and this is how I can offer it to you guys as a way of saying thank you for all that you guys do. And on the side of Nextdoor Photos, all of our editors who are survivors of human trafficking, who are victims of human trafficking, they carry positive impact in every shoe that they edit with us.
Yeah.
And we get to tell that to every single person we work with, that like, hey, this shoe is edited by a survivor of human trafficking in a third world country, and they deliver it to you in 24 hours.
Wow.
And that's our service.
Wow.
And being able to invite people into that is another way that I just, I love to be able to tell that to people when they work with us.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's something that, we don't necessarily publicize it, but when we get a chance to talk to people in person about it, and
it's impactful.
It is.
Yeah.
And so we've got 3 locations that are all based in different third world countries, and each editing base has a different number of locations that they service, but kind of the same lines along what I was talking about with my family and what they do with Freedom Business Alliance. It's not just rescuing survivors, it's also giving them rehabilitation, and then they're learning an entirely new professional skill. So Photoshop and Premiere, like those editing programs, those software programs, they can apply to like thousands of other jobs, and they do. And that's the coolest part about what we do, is not just they're working with us, they are working with multiple people,
really cool.
And different companies, and carrying positive impact through that. But we are the only real estate company for photography that does it.
Wow. That's really cool.
Indeed. I like to pride myself on us being the only company that does it. If you're looking for a competitive edge, that's no. But that's why we probably don't publicize it as much. But that's a big part of our business mission and our vision. So our goal ultimately is just we're gonna end human trafficking by hiring editors. That's our goal, and we're gonna get enough locations that can sustain bases in other countries and just keep growing that way.
Wow.
So we'll run every other photography company out of business. And Extra Photos will be the only one standing.
Oh, well, Gavin, it has been great having you on.
Thank you for having me.
People are listening and they want to find you. Where can they find you?
You guys can find me at Gavin Robyn. That's an easy one. Other accounts for Nextdoor Photos, we have a national website. It's just nextdoorphotos.com. But if you want to find our specific location here in Fredericksburg, it is fredericksburg.nextdoorphotos.com. Any other locations for any of you who are out of state, you can find through our national website as well. And you can connect to any of our local owners, ask them the same questions that Angela's asking me. They'll answer in very similar ways with their own stories and whatnot. But that's our connection. So just Nextdoor Photos, Fredericksburg, YouTube, Instagram, anywhere that, we have a Facebook, obviously, and then just Gavin Robyn for my personal page.
Thank you. Well, thank you. It was so nice to have you on.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We'll have to do it again.
Absolutely.
Yes, for sure.
And I'm sure you guys will enjoy having my mother on for the podcast.
Nice.
She'll have a lot more insight towards the human trafficking side than me. There's only so much that I know.
Thank you. Well, this is Fredericksburg Mission with Angela Rivers. Of course, if you'd like to become a foster parent, please visit www.umfs.org/foster. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us. I'm Angela Rivers with Fredericksburg Mission. Tune in at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you listen to your podcast. Join us again next week for our next episode.
How do you shorten the time it takes to buy a car? Car buying just got easier. Pohanka365.com lets you complete as much or as little of the car buying process online. Pohanka365.com. Car buying simplified. Anytime, anywhere.